Okay, so today we're going to be talking about section 1.1 from our book. It's called Points, Lines, and Planes. And so that is what we're going to be learning about today. So, two things that we want to be able to do. First, we want to be able to name points, lines, planes, segments, and rays. So that's likely going to be by the end of class today what we're able to do. And we also want to be able to talk about these things and use them in context. And then the second thing that we want to be able to do, which we might not get to until tomorrow, is identify intersections of points, lines, and planes. So, again, we're going to try to get to both of these. We might only get to this first one. Today's going to have a lot more vocabulary and writing than we typically have in class, so hang in there. It won't always be this much vocab and writing. But here we go. First word. Our first thing we're going to do is make a chart. We're going to have 3 sections in our chart. The first one is going to be the vocab word. The second one, we're going to identify what is it. We might include some of how it's labeled. But mostly in this third column, we're going to have pictures and labels. Okay, pictures and labels. All right, so our first word is point. Okay, so in geometry we have points. In algebra you probably also dealt with points. Most of your points in algebra, though, were probably within the coordinate plane. And in geometry we don't always necessarily limit ourselves to talking about just a coordinate plane. So, in geometry our basic definition of a point is a location in space. Okay, so a point is a location in space, and what it looks like is just a dot, and it has a label on it. The label is an uppercase letter, so just one capital letter. So we could have point A, point B, point T, any uppercase letter will label a point. So we call it point A, point B, point T. Those are all of our points in that picture. Okay, so there's our first vocab word. Next vocab word is a line. Okay, you probably also dealt with lines in algebra, mostly like equations of lines and such. In geometry, it's not always going to have an equation of a line that goes with it. The way we define a line in geometry is kind of by its characteristics. Lines are straight. They have no curves. And they go forever in both directions. Okay, so they're straight, they have no curves, they go on forever in both directions. So what we're looking at over here in pictures is a straight line with arrows on both ends. And then usually our lines have some points on them. So I'm going to put point A, point B, point C on our line. And the way that we label lines, we use 2 letters, so any 2 points that are on our line could be our 2 letters. So we could call this line AB, and we would put a line with arrows on either end on top of it. We could call it line BA. We could call it BC. Any combination of 2 of those letters. The only thing that we don't want to see is more than 2 letters. So if I could not call this line ABC, that would not work. That would not be a good idea. We want to use only 2 letters. Okay, so if we're labeling our line using points, we only want 2-letter combinations here. Okay, the second way that you could label a line is sometimes you'll see a lowercase cursive letter next to your line. So in this case, we have a lowercase cursive L. So you could call this line L. L's not a point on your line. It's just this little label that goes next to your line. So this would also be a way that you sometimes see lines labeled. Okay. So we have points, we have lines. The next definition that we have is a line segment. Okay. And a line segment is just a piece of a line defined by two endpoints. So for example, in my picture over here, this would be a line segment. It has two endpoints. It does not have arrows on the ends. And we'll say that those points are point C and point D. Okay. So then we could call this line segment CD, or we could reverse the letters and call it line segment DC. And when we label it, we put a little line over the top with no arrows. Okay, so only two letters. It's each of the endpoints. Okay, that's a line segment. Next definition is array. So ray, R-A-Y. Okay. An array is a part of a line, and it has a starting point, but it goes on forever in the other direction. So it's kind of like half of a line. If you were to take a line at one point and cut it in half, or cut it there. It is a part of a line with one endpoint and goes forever in one direction. So for example, we'd have one endpoint and it goes on forever in one direction. Now the way that we label array is important. So I might have this point here be point A. And maybe this is point B. The way that we label array is using 2 points, but the end point must be your first point. So I can call this ray AB, and I would put a little mini ray over the top of it. But I could not call this ray BA, because B is not the end point. So we can only call this one AB. That would be the name for our ray. Okay, next vocab word. Plane. Okay, so in algebra, you probably dealt with planes. You probably dealt with the coordinate plane all the time. So in geometry, we don't always refer to the coordinate plane. Sometimes we refer to other planes. In fact, often we refer to other planes. So the way that we're going to define plane for geometry is a flat, two-dimensional surface that goes forever in all directions. Okay, and it is really hard to draw a surface that goes on forever in all directions on a piece of paper, because a piece of paper does not go forever in all directions. But the way that we often represent planes in geometry is just by a four-sided figure. So this might be my plane that I'm referring to here. And one way that we can label a plane is with one capital cursive letter that's usually in the corner of your plane. So I could call this plane P, capital cursive P. Okay. Another way that you can label planes is with 3 points that are in your plane. And there's something special about these points. So I'm going to put some points in my plane. And I'm going to put a line in my plane because these kind of things all kind of live in planes. So you can have points, you can have lines, you can have rays. Those are all things that live in a plane. So I'll call that point A, B, C, D. Okay, so you could take 3 of your points and use it to name your plane. The only catch is that you can't use 3 points that are on the same line. So I could call this plane A, B, C if I want to, because A, B, and C are 3 points and they're not all on a line together. I could call this plane DAB if I want to, or BAD, or CDA. Any of those would work. The only thing that I could not call this plane is plane BCD. That would not work because these 3 points are all on the same line together. Okay, so you can use 3 letters. Three points that are in your plane, or you can use 1 cursive capital. Those are kind of your naming possibilities for planes here. Okay. Let's keep going here. We do have a couple more words. These are all of the item words that we've gone through so far. Now we're going to use some words to talk about those items. So, keep going here with our list. Just a minute. Okay. Next word. Our next word is contains. Okay, so this word is best used in a sentence to describe it. So I could say something like plain P contains points A, B, and C. So the picture that that would give me is kind of like the one we just used up here. I could have plane P, and then somewhere on plane P we have points A, B, and C. Okay, so that would be the word contains. So that just tells me about the relationship between where things are. So it tells me that this plane has points on it. Okay, the next word is kind of similar. The next word is lies on. So it's another describing word. So we could say something like point A lies on line L, but not on line M. Okay, so we could say something like that, and the picture that that would give me is it would tell me that I've got a line L, and I have a line M. They can be anywhere, but it also tells me that I have a point A, and that tells me that point A is on line L, but it's not on line M. So I could not put point A right here because then it would be on both lines. So I have to put it only on line L. Okay. 2 more words. These last 2 words are very important. The words are collinear for our first one. And let's just talk about that one for a moment. Collinear. So it kind of sounds like what it is. Collinear means on the same line. On the same line. So if I'm drawing a picture over here, I might have, line L. And let's put some points on it. We've got A, B, C, and then I'm going to put this point over here that's not on the line. Okay, so to say the word collinear, I could say points A, B, and C are all collinear. Because they are all three on the same line. But we can also talk about things that are not collinear. And the word we use is non-collinear. So, if I wanted to talk about point A, B, and D, those would be non-collinear because they're not on the same line. So I could say points A, B, and D are non-collinear. So that's how we talk about things being on the same line or not on the same line. All right, and then our last vocab word for today, because I think that's all we will have time for, is one more. We are going to talk about coplanar, which is a lot like collinear. Coplanar. So if collinear was for lines, coplanar is for planes. So coplanar means on the same plane. On the same plane. Okay. So a way that we often talk about coplanar or see coplanar problems in geometry is with things like a cube. So I'm going to draw a cube over here. And the way I like to draw a cube is just to draw a square first, and then draw a couple lines coming off of it. Connect those. Some of you are probably far better artists than I am, but we're trying our best here. And I'm going to label each corner with a point. So we're going to go A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay. So if you can kind of imagine here that this is a cube, kind of like this Rubik's Cube I have here. If you imagine that each of the corners is a point and that each of these flat surfaces are planes, coplanar means on the same plane. So any of the points that are on the same surface together would be coplanar. So if I'm looking at this one, if I'm looking at the front face, well, the front face here has A, B, C, and D on it. So those would be coplanar points. So I could say points A, B, C, and D are coplanar. But I could also talk about things being not coplanar or non-coplanar. So if I pick 3 points that are on a surface together, and then 1 point that's not on that surface with them, I can say they're non-coplanar. So I could say like A, B, C, and E are non-coplanar. Okay. So points A, B, C, and E are non-coplanar because they're not all on a surface together. Okay, so before we go, let's just do a couple little examples of problems you might see today. So we might be given a picture. Let's say it's a picture like this. And we've got two planes here. Let's call this plane uppercase cursive M, and we'll call this one plain cursive L. Okay, so we've got two different planes, and we're going to put some stuff in these planes. Maybe we'll put a line there, we'll put some points. Okay, so we've got this lovely picture. One question we might be asked is, what's another name for plane M? Oops, that's a terrible M. All right, another name for plane M. That's the weirdest looking M ever. So if we look back at our notes for how to name planes, we see that planes can be named by a cursive letter. Well, we already did that one. It's plane M. Or by 3 points that are in that plane. So in this case, we have P, G, and Q in that plane. So I could name this also plane PGQ if I want to. That would work. Or let's take a look at another one. Let's say another name for line AB. Okay, another name for line AB. Well, we've got 3 points on here, A, D, and B. So if we look at our how to name lines notes, we could use any 2 letters, but only 2 letters, not more than 2. So I could call this BA, I could call it plane or line DB, I could call it AD, but I could not call it ADB. So I could pick, let's go with AD. You can pick any 2 letters you like. I'm going to choose AD. Okay, so those are some types of problems that you will likely see today on your assignment. Remember, your assignment for today is IXL Geometry B1. There's a link to it in Google Classroom. And do not forget to do your exit ticket because that also counts for your attendance for today. Okay, have a wonderful day. If you need any help or anything like that, feel free to stop by my office hours tomorrow at 8 a.m. Otherwise, have a good one.